Welcome to the Fantasy Addiction Network. Today we are talking Week 14 preview of the Denver Broncos versus the Houston Texans. So this game I'm actually expecting to be pretty exciting. We're looking at an over-under of 42.5, so it's not expected to be as high scoring, but I'm actually going to take the over in this one. The implied point total right now is Houston 26 and Denver 16, so I don't think the Vegas community is trusting too much in Drew Lock, but Houston's pass defense has not been incredibly scary all year long, and I think that the Broncos can actually hang with them. I do like the Texans to win this one, but I think that there will be more points scored than are expected right now. So looking at the Houston side of the ball, there's plenty of people who recommended pivoting off of Deshaun Watson last week against New England's defense, and if you benched Deshaun Watson, you were pretty disappointed in yourself because he went off. I expect the same thing to happen this week. Denver's defense has actually been pretty poor against quarterback the last 3 weeks, and I like Watson a ton in Houston this week. I think if you have him, feel free to start him with top 3 confidence, and hopefully he ends up bringing you home to the next playoff game in your fantasy playoffs. From a running back perspective, Carlos Hyde is absolute trash. He will only be relevant if he gets a goal line touchdown, which is definitely a possibility, but you cannot bank on that at this point. There are far more better options out there on the waiver wire, most likely in your leagues. If you have Carlos Hyde, I'm looking to pivot off of him. Duke Johnson is an interesting flex play. Last week he was a key member of the Texans in defeating the New England Patriots, and last week the Chargers had found a lot of success with a similar back in Austin Eckler against the Broncos. So it's quite possible, assuming rational coaching, that Houston will use Duke Johnson in a similar vein as the Chargers used Austin Eckler last week. I think if you have Duke Johnson, he makes an interesting flex play for you. And in PPR leagues especially, he probably has a decent floor because he's most likely going to get at least 3 or 4 receptions. So I think he is a good flex play. Wide receivers, obviously you're starting DeAndre Hopkins, and I don't think you're doing that with much fear at all. The Broncos have actually been pretty poor against the wide receiver as of late, so Hopkins could actually have a tremendous game, and even if he doesn't have a tremendous game, he's most likely going to be in one of the higher echelons of wide receiver scoring this week just because he's DeAndre Hopkins. Can't bench him. So where it gets more interesting is, do you start Will Fuller and Kenny Stills? I think Will Fuller will actually have a pretty good game. If you have him in your lineup, he definitely carries tremendous upside, and I think that's what you want going into the playoffs. Kenny Stills is a little bit more of a shaky start. If he gets a big touchdown, you'll be happy, but I wouldn't want to bank on that at this point, so I'd start Fuller and look to sit Stills unless something changes in the practice reports as the week goes on. And then from a tight end perspective, Denver's actually been pretty good against the tight end. They shut Henry down last week. So if you have Darren Fells, I'm looking for a better option. If you have one, you can start him and hope for a touchdown, but I wouldn't expect Darren Fells to perform as well as you're hoping this week. From a defensive side of the ball, you don't want to play Houston this week. With Drew Lock coming on, it looks like the Broncos might actually have some fight on offense, and I'm not expecting Houston's defense to perform too well. On the Denver side of the ball, in super deep, like 2 quarterback leagues, Drew Lock is actually an interesting start. He played really well last week against the Chargers, who have a pretty good defense, and Houston is definitely not as strong against the quarterback position as the Chargers are. So I think that Drew Lock definitely carries an interesting amount of upside this week. You're not starting him in one single quarterback leagues, but like I said, in a 2 quarterback or super flex league, he definitely carries an interesting streaming upside. Plus there's not enough game film on him yet, so it's possible that Houston doesn't know how to stop him. So I would definitely be interested to see how Drew Lock does in this game. From a running back perspective, definitely start Phillip Lindsay this week. Houston was not able to stop James White at all last week, and Phillip Lindsay is a similar guy. Houston also has been very, very poor against the run all year long, so I think Phillip Lindsay is easily a running back 1 this week. I don't think you can trust Royce Freeman at this point. I think Phillip Lindsay is your only guy in the run game that you want on your fantasy team. From a receiver standpoint, you're starting Sutton every week now. Houston has been a little bit tighter against the receiver in the past few weeks, but I do think that Sutton will continue to perform. Drew Lock seemed to only have eyes for Sutton last week, and we'll see if that continues. And then from a tight end perspective, Noah Fant is an interesting play, but I don't want to rely on him now with Drew Lock. We don't know how the target distribution is going to continue to go. Noah Fant only had he only had 3 targets and 1 reception last week, so that's not something that you're looking for in a good tight end matchup. So I'm looking to pivot off of him unless you absolutely have to start him. And then I wouldn't play Denver's D on the road, especially not in this game against Houston. I think that Houston will put up a lot of points, and I don't think that you'll be too happy if you have Denver's defense in your lineup. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed this video. We'll see you in the next one.